Welcome, welcome. We are back. It's RobLive in the studio once again with the trusty man behind the steels, Mr. Chances Studios.
What up, what up? Hey,
guys.
I
messed that up. It's Chances Are Studios. Thank you, Jim, once again for providing this wonderful platform. We love everything that you put together. It grows every time. Speaking of growing, I'm trying to grow as a storyteller. And one thing that really inspires me, audience, is when I encounter a great story. And whenever I find a great story, I'm like, man, I wish I could meet the person and talk to them about the inspiration for this story and how it was created and put together. And lo and behold, God's plan, it's happening today. So before I introduce our today's guest, I wanted to tell a brief story, and then we'll introduce her. But about 2 months ago, I received a donation of books for my classroom library, being an educator at Sierra Pacific High School. I have EL students, English learners. And I was donated several crates of books from Kings County. And I was looking through the books as I was putting them on the bookshelf. And there was one particular book that I pulled out and set on my desk. And the reason I pulled this book out is because the title had my mother's nickname. Gloria is her name, but when she was a kid, they called her Lolis. And so I see Lolis in the title of this book, right? Can you see that there? It says, Brave Lolis Learns English. And I was like, I got to show this to my mom. And as I'm reading the book, I'm realizing it's kind of my mom's story, which was she was entered elementary school not knowing any English, strictly a Spanish speaker, first generation here. And this was in Texas. And the struggles, to learn the language and build the confidence and all the insecurities and obstacles that came along with it. And I was like, oh my God, I got to show this to my mom. So I set it aside. And as you fellow educators know, we get busy, we get distracted, and we kind of forget. About 2 months later, I get a message on Facebook. As you guys know, RobLive lives on Facebook. People make fun of me. It's like, if I pour some cereal, it's right there. It's televised. And I get a message on Facebook Messenger, and it's from Lucina, who is another London resident. And she says, Rob, I've got this author. You've got to meet her. I've been watching your show, and I think she would be a great fit. Shout out to Lucina, by the way. She's right here in studio, off camera. Would you hear that DJ? Oh, she can't hear the DJ bell. You'll hear it later. But anyway, shout out to her. And she says, you got to meet her. I said, all right. So I meet the author, and we get to talking. And then I say, can I see the cover of your book? And she sends it. Jim, it's the very book that I took off the shelf 2 months ago and set aside to show my mother. The book is right here. Brave Lolis Learns English by today's RobLive guest. Let's get a warm welcome for Armida Espinoza. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's not only, it's meant to be, right? It
is.
When you hear that story, I just get excited thinking about it because I've learned at this point in my life, I need to listen, right? Many people call it the universe, or they call it, the powers that be. To me, it's God's plan. I do some praying. I try to connect, and I try to listen. And as I see these different signs, right, I get a message from Lucina, who's also from London, who I met at the library that was created in London. And she's telling me about an author. I'm like, no, this has to work. And then just to confirm it, this author's book is sitting on my desk for the last 2 months with my mom's nickname on it. So I like to start from the beginning. And I wanted to ask, where were you born and raised?
So before we get started, Lolis, the name comes from my mom's name.
Oh, your mom. Okay. Your mom, my mom, both had the nickname.
My mom's name was Dolores.
Crazy.
And so Lolis is also a short name for Dolores.
Dolores and Gloria. So yes, your mom's nickname, my mom's nickname growing up. Crazy. Okay, so then you were raised here in Fresno, correct?
Yes, I am first generation. My parents were from Mexico.
Okay. Well, what part of Mexico?
Zacatecas.
Zacatecas. Okay.
And so, yes, I'm first generation, and there was 5 of us. And unfortunately, my parents did not have the opportunity to be educated. So they were agricultural workers. But yes. I always tell folks, growing up, I had food on the table, a roof over my head, a bed where I could lay my head at night. There was no drama in my upbringing. It was a pretty mellow household. And so I was very fortunate. I felt very rich, right?
That's
all I needed. When I think to myself, back then there was a lot of social service programs, and so we benefited from welfare, from food stamps.
Yeah.
We lived in the projects. The churches would bring boxes of food. The Salvation Army, that's where we would buy our clothes, and they would also give us Christmas toys.
Wow.
So we were very fortunate to have benefited from all of the social service programs that were available. And so my childhood was pretty nice. I mean, wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's amazing to hear, and I'm going to tell you what's so important about what you're saying. All of these circumstances that you're sharing, right, we sometimes interpret as a stressful situation, right? Lack of funds, having to rely on certain assistance, right? And a lot of people interpret that as, we're broke, I'm stressed out, we don't have material things. And a huge credit to yourself and your parents to interpret that as, we have what we need. The most important thing is the environment within the home. Mm-hmm. Because, I've been fortunate enough to live in different places and to meet different people of various income backgrounds, right? And I've met some fairly wealthy people where the home life was very toxic despite an abundance of resources. And so when I hear your story, I'm thinking her parents knew what was most important, and that was to have a loving, peaceful home. Mm-hmm. And the reason that resonates with me is because I work really hard to make sure that my home is peaceful. Doesn't always work, right? We have our differences. But one of the things that I try to do is provide a safe environment, only because I grew up in an environment where there was kind of walking on eggshells sometimes. My father went to Vietnam, so he had PTSD. We didn't know it at the time, what it was called. My mother was, working all the time. So it was a very stressful time for us. They did their best. But I can recall a lot of times having that tense vibe within the home. Right. Jim, what would you say the home environment was for you?
Man works, woman stays home and takes care of the kids.
And did you feel comfortable, safe?
100%. Yeah.
There you go.
Came home when the lights came on and we were outside. Parents knew all their friends' parents. I mean, yeah.
And I think that is, to me, the foundation of a positive upbringing. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we think that we need to have a certain amount of resources and be able to purchase certain things for our children. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to what you just said. It was a safe, loving home.
Well, I must admit, don't get me wrong, when I went to high school, because I grew up in Fresno in the barrio community of Edison, but when I went to high school, I went to Hoover High.
Oh, okay.
A whole different dynamic.
Hoover Patriots.
Whole different dynamics. So really in high school, I'll admit, is, I remember thinking to myself, they were all middle class, upper class.
Yeah.
Parents had 8 to 5 jobs, cars, homes, vacations, everything that I didn't have.
Yeah.
And I must admit, there was a lot of times I thought, why couldn't that be my family? I mean,
yeah.
I realized
but those are the teen years.
There was those that have and those that didn't have, and I realized I was on the not having side. But in retrospect, I wouldn't change it for the world, because even though they might have had the cars, the homes, the vacations, there was a lot of emotional issues and drama going out in their homes. And so, in retrospect, I'm so glad and thankful that I had what I had.
Well, I think, as a high school teacher, that freshman to senior year is so different, right, from the elementary school days in terms of these sort of awareness.
Mm-hmm. The material
things. And there's just little things, too, that come up. I don't know, Jim, if you recall all the expenses that came once you got to high school. You have senior pictures, you have the Letterman jacket, you have the Disneyland grad night trips, prom, right? And I think that's where finances really become, like it's okay.
It's staring you in the face.
I know where I'm at now. Whereas when you're kids, it's like having fun.
You know, Rob, we made a comment back a couple shows back that we were saying if we were poor, we didn't know it.
Yeah.
Yes. When I was in elementary, I was, never knew I was poor until I went to high school.
There it is, high school.
On the other side of town, that I realized, there was those that had and those that didn't, and I was in the didn't have. But I'm glad. Like I said, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's so great to hear. That's what I want my kids to be able to say, right? When they grow up and they get on a show like RobLive, right? That hey, we had what we needed. Mm-hmm. So growing up, right, in the household, I'm assuming it was strictly Spanish speaking.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was primarily Spanish, even though I had older brothers and siblings.
Yeah.
And of course, they went to school first and learned English. At home, it was primarily Spanish.
Were you the youngest?
I was.
The five? Okay, the baby of the family.
Mm-hmm. Although I had a sister that was Down syndrome, she was 3 years older than me.
Yes.
So she technically was the baby. Everything that she wanted, she got.
Yeah.
But yes.
So having a sister with Down syndrome, did you feel? And I find this to often be the case. Do you feel somewhat protective of her?
Very, yes. In fact, I didn't have children because I knew that I would eventually be taking care of her, that I would be her care provider, and so that's how life played out. And so I did until she passed away. At first, my mom passed away, and then I took care of her, and then she passed away. And so I was very fortunate to have had that
time with her.
Mm-hmm, yeah, wouldn't trade it for the world.
Okay, so youngest, but you have a sister who's kind of the younger sister. Were you excited to start school when you heard about this cool place that all the brothers and sisters were going to, or were you nervous?
I think we're all excited at that age, because there's going to be new toys. And
it's never the education, right?
No, it's not.
They got tricycles?
They've got tricycles, the monkey bars and the snacks and the food that, was not common food for me.
Exactly.
So it was exciting times to start school.
It's so funny, right? It's never like I want to learn, it's these random. For me, it was the food. Like we get milk and cookies, name brand cookies,
graham crackers.
Yeah, because when you're growing up, I don't know if you remember this. There was a imitation cookie called Hydrox, right? It was the Oreo imitation cookie. And so we never got real Oreos growing up. It was the Hydrox cookie. And then you would go to school, and if you had that cool kindergarten teacher, like it was name brand cookies. It's like, what?
Oreos.
What'd you do at school? I ate a real Oreo. Right? And the other combinations were kind of weird sometimes. I don't know if it was a cafeteria or budget thing, but I remember eating a lot of peanuts with raisins. Do you remember that combo? The peanuts with raisins.
Oh, we had some really good food
Yes.
Because when I was growing up, we had people that actually cooked the food in the cafeteria.
Yes.
So, I love their gravy, turkey and gravy or mashed potatoes, which is something that I never had at home.
Yeah. Stuffing. Do you remember a whole lot of food allergies? No, right?
None.
But today at my school, I'm like, hey, guys, anyone peanuts, lactose intolerant? Like there's all these.
Back then it was walk it off.
Yeah.
Walk it off.
Johnny, just go throw up and come back, shake it off. Nap time. Nap time was fun too. I don't know if you remember nap time.
I do.
And okay, so do you remember first day? I remember my first day running back to the car. What was your first day of kindergarten like?
No, I had.
You were
fun.
like, yes.
I had fun. There was no drama. It was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed kindergarten.
You were a brave soul.
Yeah, it wasn't until first grade that life kind of took a little turn for me.
Okay, so kindergarten was great. Now, what happened in first grade where things started to?
So in first grade, I remember the first day of school, the first grade teacher calling me back to the table, the kidney tables in the back, and testing me on my ABCs.
Oh, I see.
And so I unfortunately got stuck at G. It's real easy. You go A, B, C, D, F, G, and then
the song stops. What's the next lyric?
And for the life of me, I could not remember what came after G.
Yeah.
The worst part was that right above the teacher's head was the alphabet strip.
Yeah.
I knew it was there, but I couldn't cheat. I couldn't look up, right? Because she's looking right at me and I'm being tested. So I know I can't look up. And it never occurred to me to maybe fall out of the chair, drop my pencil, do a distraction
Look
of
over
some
here.
sort, right? So that I can look and see what comes after G.
Yeah. Is that a unicorn?
But what happened was, unfortunately, I stayed stuck at G, and eventually she saw that I just didn't know anything else after that. And so she let me go back to my desk. And that was a very traumatic moment for me, because all of a sudden I felt very ashamed, very embarrassed. And all of a sudden I felt like the teacher now knew I was not smart.
Yeah.
I looked around, everybody seemed to be smiling. So I just assumed that I was the only one that did not know my ABCs. And
I know that feeling. Here's something that I want to start implementing into the school system. RobLive education, right? And maybe you'd agree with me on this one. Jim, I don't know how familiar you are with this term, growth mindset. Are you familiar with that? So growth mindset is a concept that says that the brain is malleable, that we can reshape what we learn and what we know, and that part of that process is failure. It's part of the process. So if I know that something is part of a process, I do not panic when it occurs. I grew up in a school system where it was a fixed mindset. It was like, well, you know what you know, and you have natural ability, but beyond that, son, good luck to you, right? And to me, that fixed mindset is what harbors the nerves and the shame and this fear that I'm never going to get any smarter, and that my failure represents a permanent state of being, rather than what growth mindset says, that it is part of a process. Mm-hmm. Once I learned and mastered this growth mindset, failure to me was just another stepping stone. Mm-hmm. It never meant that it stops there or that we don't move on, but hindsight's 2020.
Right.
At your, first grade for me, I mean, the world just...
Right.
For me, it was reading aloud.
Right.
Man, you didn't want to make any mistakes, right?
Yeah. So for me, it was, not knowing, because we as children, we don't know the developmental stages that we're going to go through. Nobody says, that you don't have to know everything. You're not expected to know everything. I assumed I was.
Yeah.
And so just that shame really changed me as a person, as a child, right?
Yeah.
And so I made the decision right there and then that I would need to do whatever I could to not be put in that position again. Now, it never occurred to me that perhaps I should just really just really crack the books and study. That never occurred to me. But instead, what I decided to do was just go under the radar, stay silent, and not make eye contact with the teacher. So when the teacher was doing a lesson and she would ask if anybody had a question, I never raised my hand, because of course I was going to that would just be another situation where everybody's going to know that I'm not smart, right?
Yeah.
And so when the teacher would ask if there was any questions, I never had any questions. When she would come around to check to see how I was doing, and she would ask me, one-on-one, do you know what you're doing? Do you have any questions? I said I knew what I was doing. I didn't have any questions. And all I wanted her to do was just to move on to the next student.
Yeah.
Just kind of move out of my little safe world that I had created. So I basically ended up learning what I could on my own, because, of course, I wasn't going to ask my friends if I had any questions, because I didn't want them to know that I didn't know.
So it's your secret.
So, yes, exactly. So it just snowballed from there.
Yeah. And here's the other thing about that. It's a very stressful daily existence.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to school every day. Like, when are they going to find out? When are they going to catch me?
Right. It is. Because, I enjoyed school. I had fun in school. I was good in math. I was good in art. Recess. The field trips. Those are all fun.
Oh, yeah.
Art activities.
Fresno Zoo.
Fun.
Did you go to Fresno Zoo?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the reading and the writing was just a very stressful situation for me, and so I would just make sure that I navigated it very carefully, very cautiously. Again, never putting myself out there to let anybody know that I didn't know.
What about at home? Did you talk to siblings or mother or father?
Interestingly enough, we didn't. I never saw my siblings studying at home. We didn't have any books at home. And so I carried my books to and from school. Like everybody, I don't know. I think I thought that maybe just there would be that magically one day I would wake up and I would learn how to have learned how to read and write.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that never happened. So yes, there was no real studying structure at home. And again, my parents did not have formal education. So, and back then, the parents were not engaged as they are now in the school system.
Yes.
And so I don't remember, my mom would come to open house.
Mm-hmm.
My father never came to school. And so we served as interpreters to our parents whenever they came to school.
Which is good and bad.
Good and bad. But so there was a real big disconnect between my family, my life, and my home life and my life at school.
Yeah, and I think that is a very common approach for many students, especially struggling students. And if there's a language barrier for them, it's even better because, okay, mom and dad, just stay over there. I'll take care of this side.
Yes, exactly.
There's even a comedian, Ralph Barbosa, who has a whole skit about how he was raised by his grandmother who didn't speak any English. And so he would field all the calls from school, right? And he'd be on the phone. Yes, can we speak to the parents of Ralph Barbosa? Yeah, I'll interpret for my grandmother. She's taking... Yes, can you let her know that you were suspended for the next 2 days? Grandma, national holiday for the next 2 days. We don't have to school, right? So his interpretation just kept it all separate. And for him, it was convenient. But obviously, the more connected our parents are to our education, the better. You said your father never made it on school grounds. And so I can see where that would be very difficult. And when I think about that separation, I think about how lonely that struggle must have been for you.
It was, it never occurred to me how lonely that was and the impact that it was having on me. I, quite frankly, thought I was doing well, that I was navigating it well.
Yeah.
And so, I proceeded, and unfortunately, staying under the radar for first grade, academically, it put me back. By the time I went to second grade, I was already academically low.
Yeah. Was summer school an issue back then, like an option?
We did have summer school, and we did go, but things have changed a lot, in the schools. But the accountability was not there. But anyway, so unfortunately, going into second grade, I know I was very aware of being even more academically deficient in reading and writing.
Yes.
So I didn't feel like I had any course but to continue to stay under the radar and continue not to ask for help and just learn what I could on my own. Unfortunately, by the end of second grade, going into third, I was really behind. So it just snowballed, right? So I mean, I literally, unfortunately, stayed in that under the radar through 12th grade.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say like around 4th or 5th grade it ended. This went all the way through high school.
No, because I kept falling further and further academically behind every year. And
no one was catching on?
Nobody was catching on. So the embarrassment, it's just kind of like a dark hole, like you're going deeper and deeper, and you don't even, at this point, you just don't even know how to get out, right? You just continue doing what you're doing, staying under the radar. And again, because I was good in math.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That was your compensating factor.
So unfortunately, I stayed there throughout high school. And so I ended up graduating, probably reading about 4th grade level, I would assume. I mean, back then they didn't really tell you what grade levels you were reading.
Did they have like diagnostic reading tests?
Yeah, we did. But again, I just knew that I was not a strong reader. And hence, you're not a strong reader. I wasn't a strong writer. But I just made do with what I could. So yeah, that was. But I don't, and it wasn't until I wrote the book that I realized, oh my God, that was pretty traumatic.
This is, yeah, no, we got to talk about the book too, but I want to go back a little bit to kind of maybe defend all of our parents in a way. I think the case was probably similar for you, but I remember my parents, they were kind of in survivor mode, just trying to figure out life themselves and working, all these different hours. So when people talk about like, well, where are your parents, or where, man, they were just trying to stay above water.
Well, and also
kept us fed,
that
was
keep in mind that the school system in Mexico, compared to the school system here, parents were not engaged in the academics of school in Mexico. Parents would drop their children off at the gate, and whatever happened at school, and whatever happened at home, happened at home.
Two separate worlds.
Two separate worlds. And so that, for me, was the same thing here. And again, schools have changed dramatically, right? I mean, now there's a lot of parent engagement. Parents can walk in, and there can be interpreters. Materials are in Spanish or English or other languages. So it's a completely different world. So I don't want to badmouth the school system, because when you know better, you do better, right? Exactly. And our school systems there's been great leaps and bounds and have done a lot of good work. But back then, that was not the case. Yeah. And so, when you ask me, was there diagnostic tests? I'm sure I was tested, but there was no special remedies other than summer school, and you learned what you learned, and then they moved you on. They promoted you, right? Yeah. And so, so I went through high school.
You blew my mind when you're like, yeah, all the way through 12th grade. So, okay, so you get under the radar. Other than that traumatic event you said in first grade, were there any other situations throughout your elementary or high school career where you were just like, just sticks in your brain, like, wow, this was hard?
There was, there was those experiences that you had on a regular basis where you had to figure out how you were going to navigate an assignment, knowing that you had some limitations, right? I remember middle school history class, or even in high school, you the whole class, you walk in and the teacher would say, open up your books, chapter 7, and everybody's going to read a paragraph.
Oh,
right.
The group read,
right?
And the dreaded class
out loud, right? And so, and they would start with the first person in the first row, right? Yeah. So immediately I would count how many people were in front of me.
You're doing the math,
right? Count to figure out what paragraph I was going to have to read. Yeah. And just practice it over and over, making sure that I could read through it without fumbling. If there was a word that I didn't know, I could cough in between or mumble it.
You had your strategy down.
I had my strategies down.
Cough. I should have used that.
But the sad part was, in retrospect, is that I didn't listen to anything that was read ahead of time. Because I was too busy focused on my one paragraph, right?
It was like a movie script. Like, these are my lines.
And so,
right?
So when I get through with my paragraph, I'm so relieved and so lost. Then the rest of the chapter makes no sense to me.
Is that one? Wow. I also remember, and I don't know, Jim, if you were one of these guys, but I was a slow reader, right? And so when I was coming up, it was unfiltered. Oh my, him again. Can somebody read for him? Like, there was like unfiltered comments, and you just kind of took the hits. Like, no, I got it. And I always felt bad for the eager but bad reader, and they'd raise, I want to read, and you guys were, not Johnny.
No, I made words up.
Did you?
Yeah, I'm like the ambulance. And it's like ambulance. I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense.
Or I remember in elementary school when I knew that there was going to be a test. I remember in the mornings getting up, and I would be getting ready for school. Yeah. And I would start complaining to my mother that I had a sore throat, that I had a headache, that I don't feel well.
I have a kid that does that now.
Right. And so then my mom would say, being the typical mom, she was like, well, don't go to school. And then I would say, oh, no, I've got to go to school because we're going to have a test. And I was like, oh, no, I need to be at school. And so I would be literally ready to go to school, have eaten breakfast. Just as I'm walking out, I'm thinking to myself, you're right. I better not go. I do feel sick.
Just sold it. You were the Ferris Bueller of your time, just selling it. Yep. Are you sure, mija? Yeah. Oh, there's some TikTok people out there now, and they do the whole Latino dads, right? And the whole rule, if you were sick and you stayed home, you better not even look like you're having a good time. One laugh and like, wow, man, you were so sick earlier.
Stay in your room.
Yeah, yeah. Don't show any joy.
No,
because you missed school, right? Wow. And so you were allowed to stay home?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, my mom was insistent. And so I just kind of gave in to her insistence, right? And so, but I mean,
I hope my kids aren't listening.
In retrospect, you just think to yourself, wow, I mean, I was doing a lot of damage to myself.
Yeah.
But of course, in my mind, I was thinking, I'm getting through it, right? I'm walking through this, and nobody needs to know. And so I was able to get through it.
And you were also honing your survival skills for the future.
Oh, very much.
Right?
So.
This is how I navigate through things, and this is how I think on my toes, and this is how to be compelling.
Yeah, and let's not even talk about how you cheat, right?
No, the kids got it down to a science.
I got pretty good at that.
Oh, my. It's like, where's the smart kid? The really good, English reader? All right, I'm sitting next to you. Mm-hmm. Why do you always end up next to me in class? Like, oh no, I just like you, right? So, you get through high school.
I get through high school.
And now, what is the plan? Given that you said you had a 4th grade reading level, graduating,
her master's,
right?
Her starting her master's.
Right.
What was the plan?
No, hardly.
What was your thought process?
So the interesting thing was that I had met a young man who now is my husband.
Oh.
And he had a completely different experience. He was 4th generation. His parents were going to college while he was in college. Well, he was going through college. So big, middle class.
Yeah. Did you meet him in high school or what was his name?
Leonard Carrillo.
Leonard. Shout out to Leonard.
And so he was... he was 1 year older than me, and I remember he was a senior, and he was, of course, getting ready to go to college, which he had it all figured out. He was going to go to college, become a teacher, become a principal, get his doctorate. He had it all. He had it all.
Go, Leonard.
But then if you think about it, it was also the exposure that he had at home and the guidance and the support,
model,
right?
Yeah.
The role model. And I remember him asking me, so he's a senior, I'm a junior, asking me what college I'm going to go to.
Wow.
And my immediate response, of course, I didn't tell him why, but my immediate response was, I'm not going to go to college.
Oh.
I'm going to get a job and work. And of course, I wasn't going to tell him I wasn't going to go to college because academically I was not strong.
Yeah.
Because that was my little dark secret. And so, fortunately for me, we married, and I didn't go to college right away.
Did you guys marry right out of high school, or?
No. I got a job.
What was your first job?
So, I got a job with the Chicano Youth Center.
There, here in Fresno?
In Fresno. Mm-hmm. And then I started working for the state as a file clerk, which at that point you really don't need to be overly academically strong.
Okay.
And so, but what happened for me, and I'm very blessed about this in retrospect, is that, there's that saying, dime con quien andas, te diré quién eres. Tell me who you hang out with, and I'll tell you who you are. And so I was, being exposed to Leonard constantly, coming home, studying, cracking the books and staying up late at night and studying. And
prioritizing academics.
And his friends, they were all very...
What was your impression? Was it like, what are you... Leonard,
school's
over, bro.
I was coming home and watching TV.
Yeah.
And they were all coming home and working and studying late night. They went to... my husband went to Occidental College. And so that's a whole other world. And so,
Where's Occidental?
It's in Eagle Rock.
Okay, that's
Los
LA,
Angeles.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
that's this college that Obama went to.
That's where he went? I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. Now, did you, was he living out there and you guys were just seeing each other on the weekends?
Yeah, so we married, and then I moved to LA.
Oh, so you were out in LA?
Yes, I was in LA. And so but what happened was I started seeing all of them constantly studying. And like I said, while I was watching TV, they're studying.
Yeah.
And so eventually I got to, and Leonard had always encouraged me. He would always say, you should go to college, take a class, go to college. And so eventually I thought, well, maybe, if they could do it.
Yeah.
And I saw that studying for them wasn't easy, that they were having struggles.
Now, did he know your secrets? He had no idea.
No, he didn't.
Wow.
But once I took a class and I buckled down and I did something that I had never done, I actually cracked the books open. I outlined and I asked for help, and Leonard helped me a lot, how to pronounce words.
What was your first school?
I actually went to Long Beach State.
Wow.
Yes,
go for it.
But, I started with the low English classes because academic, they test you to see what English level you're at when you go into college. And so I had to start with bonehead English. And
the prerequisite to get to 101.
Exactly. But little by little, I started, like I said, I started putting the effort into studying and asking for help. And, just like I said, they were all my role models because they were all struggling. And I realized that it wasn't just me.
And that, the struggle is part of the process. And I think that's important. Viewers, just understand this. I know social media sells a certain story about what people are going through in life. And I know that I personally tend to share my highlights. That's not the whole story. That is the part that we share. So just so everybody knows, right? Let me remind you, we all struggle. Thank you for saying that.
Yes.
Okay, so now, at what point do you have this pivotal conversation with Leonard and say, hey, Leonard, just by the way, there's a lot that I didn't get to grasp in high school.
I never had that conversation with him.
He just kind of knew.
Yeah, I think,
Man, Leonard's a keeper.
He is a keeper.
He knew. He knew.
When I was asking simple questions like, how do you say this word?
Did the eyes get big on Leonard? Like,
no, Leonard was,
played it off.
I was very blessed. Leonard was just, he would just help me,
I think he's my new hero. Did he become a teacher?
Yes, he did.
There you go. Can we get a DJ? Yeah, for Leonard. Because, with my wife, right, there's certain things. I'm sure, Jim, you have these things where it's the right, appropriate time to play it off. And you go, what? Oh, okay, forget it, right? Because you didn't play it right,
No, my wife always still laughs. I can't believe you're an educator. I can't believe you're a teacher.
Wow. Okay, and so Leonard's there, and he's my role model. And you get through Long Beach.
I get my BA in sociology.
Okay.
And I continue to work for the state, and I get promoted. I start making my way up through those ranks. And then Leonard had always said, Leonard, he'd always said I should be a teacher.
Yeah.
And I always, the back of my mind was, how could I possibly be a teacher? I mean, I was so academically low.
Yeah.
But the more I spent time with him and the more successes I had in college, and it was several years after I'd gotten my sociology degree that I thought to myself, I was ready to change careers. And at that point, I realized that, I had learned quite a bit, and that maybe, in fact, I could be a teacher. Mm-hmm. So I went back and got my teaching credential.
Good, man, this is a great... So I want to talk a little bit about this, and I know Jim mentioned this to me a couple of times, and I know I felt it. So Jim's background is, right, he was a photojournalist for decades, right, with every channel in the Central Valley. And then he calls me one time, he's like, hey, I'm thinking about teaching. I'm like, what? Really? You coming? All right. And I'm all excited for him. But Jim, I want you to talk a little bit about this. I know I felt it. And it's this thing that we call imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. And it's this whole idea that, okay, I'm now the guy who's the source of knowledge in this room. And I'm supposed to impart wisdom on these kids. And I don't know everything. I feel a little bit like an imposter. Did you go through that?
Yeah. And what was interesting is not even my boss knew what I was teaching about. Like, it's like, who knows camera stuff? Who knows all that stuff? And I'm like, I could be making up stuff and you wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
But it is interesting thinking that these young adults are looking up to you to know that you're educated, the experience. And I actually had a kid just tell me yesterday that, because I'm having the kids critique my class as a video. And so they're talking about me, just not me there. So I hear their conversations and their stories later.
Like you're not in the room?
No, they're doing the story and they're turning it in.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of them were saying that the best part about my class was the experience that I talk about, and the job experiences, the people I've met, the personal real life stories and stuff. And I think it really made me start thinking, man, I do talk a lot about my life, but I want to kind of make sure it morphs into to the educator part of what we're trying to teach them. Yeah. So, but yeah, it is interesting that I'm like, I hope these kids' light bulbs go off, because I don't see very many. Sometimes.
If they only knew, right?
No, that imposter syndrome is very real.
Yeah,
very real.
Because it's like that first. So another thing that I wanted to point out, and this is going back to Leonard, and I don't know who the Leonard was in Jim's life. I know I had several of them. They would come to me and say, hey, you'd make a great educator. And I'm like, are you me? I failed algebra 3 times in high school. Are you sure you're talking to me? It was these magnificent individuals who could see something in you that you couldn't see yourself. And you almost like sometimes respond with a little bit of attitude, like, you're just being sarcastic right now. You're just messing with me. And I had so many blessed individuals who would say, no, you're going to be a great teacher. And I'm like, if they only knew.
Right.
And lo and behold, everything they believed about me eventually manifested itself. And I thought part of it is they were so convincing. You know, I'm sure at some point they said, hey, you need to be a teacher. And you're like, what? Right. So for you, beyond Leonard, was there any other mentor teachers who just saw something in you and harnessed that, fostered that out of you?
I don't. Leonard became my biggest role model and my biggest mentor.
And he saw it.
And so, yeah. So, and then I would see other teachers.
Yeah.
Because, of course, that was his world. And so I would go to school and help him in his classroom. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, well, if they're doing that, I could do that.
Yeah. You know, it helps to have somebody who's less qualified do something in front of you. Because you're like, well, if Joe Schmo pulled it off, then it's not good to compare, but sometimes you can't help it. And for me, there was always that, like you said, that motivation of someone who you knew, well, I can do a better job than that. So,
well, I don't know if I was looking at them and going, I could do better than they were doing. But what I was looking at is going, okay, what they're doing is I could do that. I mean,
it's not impossible.
It's not impossible. It's not out of my reach.
See, you're a better human being than I am. I'm like, he can't do it. No. So, Jim, for you, like, were you looking at the other teachers and going, I think I can pull this off? Or were you, I'm an imposter, I hope nobody finds out?
Well, I think what challenged me is because I was still in the industry, and I was just taking what I was using at work at the stations and just bringing it to the classroom. And then it just built up my portfolio of my
skills.
My skills, trying to tech them. But then I'm a perfectionist to some degree, so sometimes Rob would know this, but I get really
fixated on details.
Yes, and I want them to know that, and it's like I have to dumbify it. I have to bring it down to these are only high school kids. And it's like they're not at that college level.
Right.
Then they're not into the experience level. But there are those handful that you're just like, oh my gosh.
They get it.
Yes, and better than I did, and you just, those are the ones that I really look back and say, that's why I'm teaching. That's the love of this game that we're doing in education. So.
I know. I would, when I was a kindergarten teacher and first grade teacher, and I could just see the light bulb going on in their in their little heads, and it just amazed me. I mean, because they're like sponges, and they're right. If you tell them they're, go sit down and write a sentence, they'll go sit down and write a sentence. They don't realize that it doesn't dawn on them that I don't know how to write a sentence. Like, oh, okay, I'll go do it.
Exactly. I preach this all the time in my classes, and that is, I want you to harness the spirit of your kindergarten self, right? And I'll tell you why. If I took a group of kindergartners and I said, hey, who knows how to sing? How many hands go up? Everyone can sing. Who knows how to dance? Not only do they raise their hands, but a couple of them will demonstrate for you, right? Can anyone here draw? They all know how to draw, right? Take those same 3 questions and apply it to your high school classes. And now the insecurities, society, the naysayers, the trolls have all gotten to these kids at that point. And you say, who can sing? And you might have a award-winning, top-notch choir person in your class, and they'll be like,
their friends will be saying they can sing.
Yeah, a little bit. And I say, guys, when did we lose all these abilities? They're still within you. It's just that society and your peers have kind of sold you on something else. It's still there, and I want you to harness that kindergarten spirit.
I think now in our generation, though, in this time of life, the repercussions of knowing if they do step out, they're more likely to get slapped and shut down, regardless if they could sing, dance, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think just that my mom would tell me I know how to sing and dance, but 5,000 likes and subscribers to my channel might have a different opinion about me if they saw me dance.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so
my mom thinks I'm the greatest podcaster to ever exist. And I'm like, well, Mom, 342 people agree with you as opposed to his 7 million. Right? No, that's got to love moms, right? She says, you have a face only a mother can love. And I was like, thanks, I think. So kindergarten was your first gig? Why'd you pick that age?
Because I was pretty sure I was smarter than a kindergartner.
That is strategy. See those survival skills just kicking in. That is the smartest answer.
I would never go for a 5th grade or 4th grade. I'm like, that's the writing skills at that level.
No, I get that.
I'm like,
so you get there.
I think
yeah.
Kindergarten first, I think I can handle this one.
And is that where you stayed throughout your teaching career?
I was only in the classroom a couple of years, but yes, I stayed
right?
2nd grade,
Stay
no higher than 2nd grade.
Yeah. I can color within the lines. All right.
Better than you.
Yeah, better than you. So that experience in the classroom, I'm sure, was probably amazing because as high school teachers, we joke about the fact that, elementary school, the kids all still love you, right?
They do.
You're their hero.
Yeah, I don't
High
think
school,
I could,
man, it's a different vibe.
Yeah, I don't think I could do middle school or even 5th on up. It's a different vibe.
It's a tough crowd, huh?
Yeah, it is a tough crowd.
But here's the thing about the kindergarten teacher. You are the first spark. And that is a huge responsibility as well.
Well, it amazes me that people will say, oh, my God, you were a kindergarten teacher. I could never teach kindergarten. And I just
it's a lot of pressure.
And I remember thinking, this is the best. And it was the best.
And that's why you were there.
So
but if you think about it like us, here's what we're thinking. Man, this is my only chance to make a first impression on his education. If I drop the ball on him, I could send him down a whole different path for the next 12 years. And that's a lot to carry. But you lived in that present moment, I'm sure, and just enjoyed this opportunity.
For a high schooler, we would say that to a kindergarten. They're like, what? Yeah. What does that mean?
No, I'm saying in my head.
My life's ruined if I don't color in the lines?
No, in my head, I'm thinking that, right? You know, I have this thing in my classroom that we do once a month. Jim, I strongly encourage this for high school kids. It's called color therapy. So I made up this list of rules, right? That once a month, they walk in and they hear, that soothing kind of mystical music that you hear when you go get a massage, right? So they hear the mellow music, the spa music. They hear it and they see the color therapy rules. And there's a box of crayons at every desk, right? We're in groups of 4. You've seen the classroom. And in the back of the room, there's coloring pages. Every theme is different, right? And I excuse them one at a time to go get their coloring page. And then I say, you got to follow the rules or we stop this right now. And the whole concept is this. I have a few friends who have been very financially successful, right? Well past the point that they could hire a gardener or a landscape or whatever, and they still cut their own grass. And so I asked him, I say, hey, why are you still cutting the grass? He's like, it's the only mindless, simple task that I can do and not have to think about anything else when I do it. Because, it's cut the grass. And when I do it, my stresses, my pressures, my problems, my relationships, my financial decisions all fall to the wayside for the 30 minutes, right? Because I'm focused on this one simple task. And I said, I think coloring can do that. And so when these kids color, I say, put away all your makeup work, put away your phones, put away anything that is a source of anxiety and stress, and just focus on coloring in the lines. And they love it. Right? And a lot of people would say...
It's very therapeutic.
Yeah, they're like, that's childish. No, these kids look forward to it. I got a thank you letter the other day, the end of the year stuff. And in there was like, thank you for the color therapy days, because I really needed it. Man, you break that out for your seniors in May, they'll love you. Because it's like, man, I've got so many things piled up on me. Can I have 30 minutes apiece? Mm-hmm. So with that being said, to me, kindergarten is that first therapeutic experience in the education, away from home. Mm-hmm. So I thank you for that work. So then she's like, well, it wasn't enough. I've got to go ahead and just become an author. So is this Leonard too?
No.
Was Leonard an author?
No, so I had always loved writing. But again, because of my insecurities about my writing, I would always write and I would throw everything away because I didn't want somebody to see it, right? And then see all the misspells or whatever.
Grammarly wasn't around at the time.
Yeah, Grammarly was not around. But in any event, so when I retired, and for me, writing is a way of kind of getting lost in my little world. It's just me.
Oh, yeah.
But when I retired, I thought, I'm going to go back to writing and just get lost in my little world there. And then it occurred to me, I thought, maybe I should take a writing class. Kind of never thought about taking a writing class. I thought, why don't you take a writing class of children's writing? Because I would write stories, children's stories, but the only one that got to read them was Leonard. Because, of course, there was a safety, I felt comfortable. I felt safe with him. And he would give me some feedback, but for the most part, after 40-something years of marriage, he pretty much liked everything I wrote.
You're getting us all in trouble right now because someone's going to watch this, right, Jim? They're going to be like, why can't you be like Leonard? Leonard doesn't judge.
Well, he knew better, I should say. That's what I'm saying, after 40-something years of marriage.
Yeah.
But in any event, I thought to myself, I should take a children's writing class just for the heck of it. Maybe learn something, right?
Yeah.
Keep learning. And so I did. And one thing led to another. And, it was through a publishing company. And they encouraged me to publish a story.
How do you choose what you're going to write about?
So I got to tell you, when I decided to, I had sent a couple of stories out to publishers. And I swear they all go into this dark hole and you never hear anything back. So I did get a couple of rejection letters, but then a lot of, some folks I never heard back from. So it occurred to me, I thought, if at this point I'm 62 and I'm thinking to myself, 64. And I'm thinking to myself, if I'm going to publish, if one book is going to get published in my lifetime, I don't have the time to wait around to be sending it to a publisher and keep, hoping that it's going to land on somebody's desk and they're going to like it, right? Yeah. And this is going to be, they're going to want to publish it. I don't have the time for that. And so I decided to self-publish.
Now, how does that process work?
I've learned a lot. Previously, people that would self-publish, there was that mindset that if you don't get published by a publishing company, because your work is not good enough, then you self-publish. It was like people that self-publish just because their work was not good enough to be published by somebody else, right? Yeah. So, but that has changed with technology. And so now people can self-publish and upload their book onto Amazon, and it goes live and it starts selling on Amazon.
It's amazing.
So, you don't need a publisher to do it for you anymore. And so I decided that I would self-publish. And the one story that I was going to self-publish was going to be a story about my mother, because I figured it was very dear to my heart.
Yeah.
That had my mother in the story, and my mom had passed away, and I thought this is going to be the one book. Except for the editor that was helping me with the story. She kept finding holes in the story. It's like, it doesn't make sense, and logically, and she just kept finding holes. And I finally had to, after 2 months of going back and forth, and me trying to fix the story and adjust it, but keep it still intact to the story that I had written, I finally decided perhaps maybe this is not the story that I'm supposed to be writing right now in this time in my life. So I put the story aside, and I just started meditating and just kind of trying to free my mind of holding on to that one story that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And thinking to myself, okay, what am I supposed to be writing? What am I supposed to be publishing? And that's where this experience of me in first grade kept popping up. And so I realized the need for the story to be shared with children, especially coming out of education.
Yes.
How so many children are still struggling with this. And so I wrote the story within like 2 or 3 days. And I sent it to the editor, and she loved it. She says, this is it. Just like that. And so the story was never, had never been written until I put that other story aside and just really quiet my mind and just sat with my experiences, my life experiences. I'm thinking to myself, what am I supposed to be sharing in my life at this stage of my life?
So wise to do that.
And so, so that's where the story came from. And that's how it was.
So let's, can you share for our viewers a brief summary of Brave Lolis Learns English?
So, of course, the story, the beginning part is Loli's first day of school. Teacher asks her to recite the ABC. She gets stuck at G. And so, of course, in a children's story, for a children's story or picture book story, which is what this is, you need to keep it under 1,000 words.
Okay.
So there's these structures to children's stories, to picture books. And so I knew that, of course, you had to have some experiences, some exercises or encounters that would build up to culminating, a final outcome of a nice story.
Yes.
And so I decided the first day, of course, she gets tested on her ABCs. She gets stuck at G, and she's embarrassed and humiliated.
Yeah.
Not because the teacher said anything to her, just her own emotions.
Yeah, kind of a self-inflicted.
Right, getting away from her. And so then the second day, the teacher tests everybody on vocabulary words. And so again, knowing my experience at that time, I was very limited in my vocabulary. And so Lolis gets stuck after a couple of words.
Yeah.
And so then the teacher makes an announcement that, please practice your vocabulary words tonight, because tomorrow we're going to do a writing test and then a read out loud.
Test anxiety.
So exactly. It's just every day it's just building up.
It's like poor Lolis, man.
She's just thinking, just
one more day.
First grade is the worst, right?
Yeah.
And so luckily, she has a very wise mother, because the mother is learning English.
Oh, now this makes sense.
Yes, the mother's learning English herself. And so when the mother is putting Lolis to bed, her mother takes out her English book, and Lolis hears her mother saying to herself, learning English is easy. And Lolis doesn't understand why is she saying that to herself.
Yeah.
So what the mother's doing, the mother's telling herself that learning English is easy, because that's how she's pushing her way through.
Affirmations.
Right? And so Lolis gets to the point where she can't take it anymore. She doesn't want to go to school. And she opens up to her mother, that learning English is hard. And she doesn't want to go to school anymore. And so that's where their mom and her have a conversation.
That's the breakthrough conversation.
The breakthrough conversation where the mother says, because Lolis asks her, why is learning English easy for you?
Yeah.
And so the mom says, it's not easy. I just tell myself it's easy.
Wow. So here's what I love about your book, and I think great books all do this. Jim, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I was reading this, Judy Blume. Do you remember the author, Judy Blume? She did a lot of
I never read her books.
Okay, yes, so she did a lot of the puberty stuff, mm-hmm. and the changes that happen from junior high to high school, right?
They were too hard for me.
Yes. I'm sorry. I know it was the fourth grade you were talking about. And so I remember the first time I read a book and an internal thought that the character was having was the exact thought that I was going through. And in my mind, no one else was going through that experience. And now here's this character who's saying and thinking the same things I am. And the connections there that, whoa, I'm not alone in this, because whoever wrote this had to know that this experience exists. And now I am no longer alone in my experience, not because of a friend or a fellow human being, but because of a book. Mm-hmm. And when I look at Lolis, right? Brave Lolis Learns English, that struggle, that shame, that embarrassment of not grasping something at the same rate as the people around you it resonates with me and a lot of learners, and especially my mother. And I told you off camera, and Jim, I don't know if I ever told you this, my mom went to school in Texas, right? And at that time, it was a no Spanish rule. So if you spoke Spanish in the classroom, it was a smack to the mouth. I mean, it was old school, right, where they could hit you. And so she said for like kindergarten, first grade, she was afraid to speak because she didn't know English yet, and they weren't really teaching her.
Right.
And the only thing she could say was either Spanish, and she used to do gibberish because they would tell her to talk in English, and she'd go, she, right? She's trying to mimic with the sounds. She had no idea what she was saying. And she was like, oh, you want to be a smart mouth? Another smack to the mouth. And so she was traumatized for many years as a youngster. And you capture those emotions in this book. And that's what really, I was like, man, I've got to meet whoever wrote this. And lo and behold, here you are.
Yes, because, I not only because I experienced it, but because I see so many of our children to this day going under the radar, staying silent.
Yeah.
Because they're embarrassed, and children will have a tendency to make fun of each other, right? So not only is it the shame of you not knowing, but then you have to deal with other children making fun of you.
It's a cultural thing. Jim told me, I said, Jim, why don't you bring your friends into the studio? He goes, dude, if you brought all those guys in here, we would just go after each other for an hour. Right? Like it's a bonding. It's
a good thing, though. I mean, it's just making fun of each other and a good thing.
I think it's dysfunctional, but it is what it is. As you were saying.
No, so this story resonates so, and even once I started sharing the story, initially I was sharing it with a lot of English learners.
Yeah. Because this is their journey.
Right. But then it quickly became evident to me that the story is applicable to just English-only students who are struggling to learn how to read English and themselves.
Yeah, it's
right?
the same struggle.
The same struggle, right? And so, or math or science or whatever.
Mine was math. What was your Achilles heel in school?
Math. It was math.
Yeah. Okay, so hear me out. Tell me if this was you. It's numbers, right? I got you. Division, addition, subtraction, right? I got you. Now you brought letters into the game. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wait, what? A plus B equal. And X, I just couldn't grasp.
X square root of pi.
I couldn't grasp that.
Is. Nope. Mm-mm.
Once you brought in the alphabet, I was lost.
And let me ask you this. Have you used any of that since you've left high school? Yeah.
No. Wow.
So now when I go out.
We love you, math teachers.
Yeah, I know.
I was good at math, okay? Yeah. and they say that for second language learners, we're really good at math, and I was.
The word problems, right? That's when it gets a little tricky.
Oh, yes, the word problems.
They're like, why are you guys bringing letters into it?
No, I could do the letters, but
stick to the numbers.
When you do have to read a paragraph.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God.
Mary had 7 apples.
But anyway, so the book now, I realize how it resonates with anybody who's learning anything. And so now I actually use the book not only for children, all children. I even use this book with middle school and high school students. I use it with teachers, with parents, with administrators.
Yeah. To help them understand the process.
Right, and to sensitize them, right, to just kind of a gentle reminder of what our children are going through.
Yes, we need that.
Not just our English, or not just our second language learners, but our English-only students as well. And so, but it never fails that I always have when I'm doing the presentation to teachers or parents, they get emotional because they actually start recalling what they went through, some of the anxieties that they had learning themselves.
I may or may not have shed a tear the first time I read this.
And they get emotional. It's pretty heavy.
It is.
You know, when I use it I was just over at Central High School.
Yes, Grizzlies.
I use it with students at the high school level, and you would think that I say to them, you know, I know it's a children's book, but just bear with me, and you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
High school students are paying attention, and they know that they too are experiencing. If they're staying under the radar, and I'm very clear with them. I said, you know, if you think that it's embarrassing now, asking for help, I said, wait till you graduate, and you're still having to ask for help.
Oh yeah.
I said, because trust me, I said, you're not going to wake up one morning after you graduate and you would have learned how to read and write.
The secret just gets
adult
bigger.
world, yeah.
Yes, so I said, you know, I said many of you, and so what I do after I read the story, I literally ask folks. I said, who here has felt like lolis? And
the hands are up.
The hands are up. The hands are up.
Do you have any struggling readers in your video production courses?
Yep.
And how do you manage that? Because it's so hands-on?
Yeah, because my kids have to write a script. And so they have to write a script for their film, just like in your script's coming over.
Yeah.
But then they have to draw a storyboard.
Oh, yes.
And they draw out the storyboard very well.
So they thrive on that side of it.
Yeah, and the script writing is very hard. They think that in a 3 to 5 minute short film is dialogue written as a paragraph. And I'm like, there's a lot more information in a script. I don't think Star Wars or any other movie had only 2 pages. You know, and they don't like to write it. They're all, it's in here, it's in their head. You know, so I'm like,
I got it, right?
Mm-hmm. So what I've done is challenged them, and I'm strict. I'm like a perfectionist, like I said, but I've actually had them write scripts, and then I've had other groups video that script.
Oh, so they could see.
Yeah, and then what their vision is, the vision they might have compared to a production setup of another group, that how they would shoot it, and just like what we did with you. Yeah. So we do the cross curriculum. His kids write scripts and my kids film them,
interpret them.
Yeah,
and I always tell them, hey, don't fall in love with that script because they're going to tear it apart and make it their own, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it is a learning experience.
Yeah, because they have different perspectives of what that character may or may not feel or do or act and that sort of.
Or even gender.
Yeah, that's true.
Like that. No, it went from a female character to a male character. I was like, wait, I wrote it as Maddie. No, Maddie's Mark.
Yeah,
okay.
Mark. Yeah. So.
No, it's great. It's interesting. So now this is getting out. It's resonating with students, with teachers, with administrators. What is next on the list for you?
So that book came out in 2022.
Okay.
And then in 2023, last year, a sequel came out.
Oh, Lolis.
Brave Lolis Box of Hope.
And Box of Hope represents?
So in 2017.
Hold it up. And there we go.
Yes. In 2017, the hurricane that hit Puerto Rico.
Oh, yeah.
So I happened to be coming home, and I was just going through, scrolling through channels, and I came across Univision, the Spanish station, and they
you worked.
and they were showing the damage, that the hurricane had hit.
We all saw
Puerto
that.
Rico.
That was...
And I stayed there. I kept the TV there and just listening and seeing what was happening, and the anchor woman was interviewing. Because, of course, she was putting out the call for help, right? They were showing all the devastation. And then they were saying, please donate. The families could use food, clothing, furniture. They lost everything, right? Money, funds of any kind. And so there was this little man. And so this is a true story. He lived on the other side of the mountain from where the hurricane had hit. And he had heard about the hurricane. And he had an extra bag of grain. So he loads his bag of grain onto his donkey, walks over the mountain. So, takes his donkey with his bag of grain over the mountain to the other side where the damage was done. And he is donating this bag of grain that he held in hopes of helping feed some of the people. And so I was just captivated with that little story as she's interviewing him, like, what brought you here? And he says, I have an extra bag of grain and I came to help.
Yeah.
And so I take that story, and Lolis is watching the news with her parents. And so the anchor, the news person says, what a generous thing to do. And so Lolis wants to know, what does generous mean? So the mom explains what generous means. And Lolis thinks to herself, when I grow up, I want to be generous, like the little old man. So the mom says, you don't have to wait till you grow up. You can be generous now. And she says, but I'm a little girl. How can I be generous? And she says, you just have to think about it, put it out there, and it'll come. An idea will come. So that's where the story. I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story.
Got to read it.
Because you got to read it.
And where can we get Brave Loli's Box of Hope if we wanted to read this?
So both of them are on Amazon or Barnes & Noble's at Petunia Bookstore.
Got that? Amazon Prime. You guys get the free shipping. And which bookstore?
Petunia's Bookstore.
That here in Fresno?
Mm-hmm. Or Barnes & Noble.
Barnes & Noble's still around. That's good. I'm glad we still have physical bookstores. I don't see them, but I'm glad they exist.
Yeah, they're still there. They're still there.
Right. That is awesome and amazing. We're looking forward to your work. I want to give a quick shout out, though. We were talking about the illustrator, Robert Blancas.
Yes.
And can you hold up that one illustration right there? And guys, this is what I was so impressed with. To be an artist and capture an emotion is very difficult. And he does it multiple times in the first Loli's book. That's one of them right there. Learning English is fun and easy. That expression, the eyes half, slightly open. And there's another one where she's kind of teared up, right? And I think what page? Oh no, here's one where this is that. Right, Jim. I know you've seen this. The deer in the headlights look, right?
Yes.
Where you're. Hey Tyler, are you done with that editing? It's the same look. It's international.
That happened today too.
It's like. I didn't think you were going to call on me, Chance, right? It's like, and that one, the tear, on the verge of tears, somehow you can see the tears welling. So I really want to give a shout out to Robert Blancas for his work as well.
He's amazing. And it was very interesting. I wanted to, when you self-publish, you, of course, have to find your own illustrator.
Yes.
And I wanted somebody that was local. It just
good for you.
There's illustrators all over the world that you could go onto websites and hire somebody, and you mail out your manuscript, and they do a storyboard, and and you work through the computer. But that just it was like my baby, right? And I could not see myself like sending my manuscript to somebody that I didn't know.
And it ends up on Amazon under a different author's name.
Right. So,
that's my book.
Yeah. So I met Robert, and initially his forte is Marvel characters, superheroes.
Oh, okay.
His website is amazing.
Okay, we won't put his website on there as well.
Yes. And so when I first approached him, his first response was, he goes, I don't do children's books. I've never done children's books. But
it's always a first.
Right. But the more we talked about it, the more he finally decided, I'll sketch something out and see, what you think, and I'll take a shot at it. And we worked really well together. And all of his illustrations are done with colored pencils by hand. So there's nothing technology.
Freehand. Wow.
They're all freehand.
No AI, huh?
No AI. And
Good
so,
for
yeah,
you.
so he said that this was more challenging than all the superheroes that he's ever done. And his stuff, is sold, right? He sells his stuff. And, but yeah, he said that this was even more, this was harder than any of the other work that he's ever done.
I can imagine having to capture those emotions.
Yeah.
Now, I can't help but notice, but is that Loli sitting next to you?
This is Loli's. My friend's mom made Loli's this character for me, and now she goes everywhere I go, and so she has her fan base now.
She even has the pink headband and the backpack with the little teddy bear hanging out.
It was very interesting because just the other day I noticed that I did not notice that the pink teddy bear was in her backpack.
Yeah, I just saw it on the cover.
From her first book, because the pink teddy bear actually is in the second book.
Oh,
it's
in there again.
It's in there again, right at the front.
We got to give Teddy a name.
Yeah, so this is one of the illustrations where she's hugging her teddy.
Oh
bear.
my! Look at that.
So yeah, so now she goes with me.
Lolis, wow! You brought her to life, and you've inspired so many people, including myself.
Thank you. It's been. This was never on the radar, as I said. Not being able to read, not being a strong reader or writer in high school. This was never on the radar, but you just never know where life is going to take you. So
exactly. Viewers out there, I just want you guys to understand that if you start your path in a certain place, that doesn't necessarily mean that's where you're going to end up. The world can take you anywhere if you're willing to give it a try, have some survival skills, right?
Right.
Si se puede.
Si se puede.
So I want to thank you again. Guys, let's get a round of applause for Armida Espinoza. Woo! Please come check out her book. It's on Amazon. I'm going to put the link on as well. We have Brave Lolis Learns English, and we have Loli's Box of Hope. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, Box of Hope.
Go out and follow that. And again, thank you guys for watching today. Thank you for Big Jim and Chances Are Studios for providing a platform for us. Thank you to everyone who's checking this out. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoy our past episodes, please like and subscribe to RobLive's channel. And as this thing grows, we continue to bring you more inspirational interviews. Until next time, this is RobLive with Jim Chance and our special guest, Armida Espinoza, saying love, peace, and chicken grease. We out.